Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And today I want to get into a story out of New Orleans. But before we get started, I want to give you what are the similarities. I want to ask you a question. What are the similarities between the city of St. Louis and the city of New Orleans? Well, for starters, the number one Mardi Gras parade and celebration starts with New Orleans. And the second largest Mardi Gras parade and events in America is in St. Louis, Missouri. Yes, St. Louis, Missouri has the second largest Mardi Gras parade in America today. Also, St. Louis has had a plethora of problems with our new sheriff's department and sheriff, Alfred Montgomery. I did a previous story on him. He's been indicted on state and federal charges and has been in jail since last October, almost 9 months. And he had state and federal crimes, including, and some of the charges even included having then acting jail commissioner Tammy Ross handcuff and him disarming former sheriff's deputy Daryl Wilson. So you got to look into that story. That's here in St. Louis. There's been a lot of chaos and disruption with our own sheriff's department. And as I said, the newly elected sheriff from last year, Alfred Montgomery, is in jail right now. So there have been there's been issues at our St. Louis City Jail called the St. Louis Justice Center, City Justice Center. There have been at least 22 deaths at the St. Louis City Justice Center since 2020. In the last 6 years, that's averaging like 5 deaths a year. A few riots have happened also there. There is an understaffing issue here with correctional officers, sheriffs, and police officers. So there's a public safety issue that's going on straight from City Hall all the way onto our streets. Remember, the sheriff title is an elected position, even slightly political. The people vote for the sheriff, and the sheriff must work in alignment with City Hall and the mayor's office. It's a prideful position. As Dr. Martin Luther King once said in one of his speeches, a man cannot stand or ride on the back of a man who is walking upright. So a position like being the sheriff of a major city is a boastful, professional, admired position in relations to city government. You must carry yourself in an upstanding, professional way. The city government and the people of your city is counting on you to do the right thing when it comes to public safety. That is very important. So it's a highly garnered position. Many people don't pay attention outside of the mayor, chief of police, fire chief, the city comptroller. People really don't pay attention to who's going to be the sheriff or what his or her position is. But it falls under public safety, and it's very important for that person to be an upstanding professional. And as I said, I'll repeat it again of a Dr. Martin Luther King quote. He said, a man cannot stand or ride on the back of a man who is walking upright. So hold your head up high, keep your professional standards at a certain level, and stay out of the fray of negativity and criminality. So in saying all that, I want to get into this story. So we got St. Louis, you got New Orleans, Mardi Gras #1, St. Louis, Mardi Gras #2. We had sheriff issues here in St. Louis with Sheriff Alfred Montgomery, who has been detained and arrested for the last 9 months. But I got to get into a story out of New Orleans that might be even bigger, dealing with the sheriff's department. And this person made history as the first black female sheriff in the history of New Orleans. And this story also, Alfred Montgomery is a black man in his early 30s. And this indictment on the New Orleans sheriff is a black female. So it puts a little black eye or starched eye on these two people of color who are in these highly guarded positions as the sheriff of their major cities. So New Orleans Sheriff Susan Hutson has been indicted on 30 counts just days before her term ended, just before she was leaving office. The sheriff of New Orleans was hit on a Wednesday with a sweeping 30-count indictment alleging malfeasance and payroll fraud amid an outside investigation into her office, prompted by a massive jailbreak nearly a year earlier. If you all remember, a year ago, there were two things that happened in New Orleans a year or two ago. There was that terrorist attack by the guy right before the Super Bowl, where he had ran over some people. And I think it was before the Super Bowl, but it was during that time, and ran over some people, got out, shot some folks, and police officers got shot, and they ended up killing him. They consider that a terrorist attack. And then the second thing was this major jailbreak where 10 inmates broke out of the New Orleans City Jail and were on the run, and they couldn't find them for several months. And this is all under the watchful eye of the sheriff, Susan Hutson. So the indictment against Sheriff Susan Hutson, whose duties included operating the New Orleans jail, was brought by Liz Muriel, the Louisiana State's Attorney General. It came days before Ms. Hutson was set to leave office, bringing a sudden and sharp conclusion to a tenure that began in 2022 with promise of reform. So Susan Hutson only been there 3 years. Susan Hutson's chief financial officer, Bianca Brown, was also indicted on 20 felony counts. Attorney Muriel's office alleges Susan Hutson's refusal to follow basic legal requirements and failure to take minimal precautions enabled a May 10th, 2025 mass escape that was one of the largest and most brazen jailbreaks in recent U.S. history. The charges against Susan Hutson include 14 counts of malfeasance in office, along with multiple counts of conspiracy, filing false public records, and obstruction of justice. Bianca Brown was also indicted on multiple counts of malfeasance in office and obstruction of justice, among other charges. A judge set Sheriff Susan Hutson's bond at $300,000 and Bianca Brown's bond at $200,000. And I tell you all the time, if you want to see how serious the state is coming after you on a criminal complaint or a criminal charge, you got to look at what you're being charged with, whether state or federal, and you have to look at what your bond hearing and what your bond amount is set at. And when you're talking over $100,000 or more, the state or the feds are pretty serious about coming to get you and your charges. Ms. Hutson made bond at a suburban jail on the other side of the Mississippi River from New Orleans. But both women were ordered to surrender their passports and are prohibited from leaving the state of Louisiana. 4 years before her indictment, Sheriff Susan Hutson's victory over longtime incumbent Marlon Gusman was heralded as a watershed moment, the first time a black woman had ever held the office of the sheriff in New Orleans. But Sheriff Susan Hutson's ensuing sole term was marred by controversy. There were staffing scandals and allegations that she overspent on hotel rooms for some of her top brass during the city's Mardi Gras celebrations. How many times have we heard this about elected officials, school superintendents with the overspending, using the public's money as their own cachet, as their own bank account, and just writing checks or using their debit card and spending like crazy until they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. So state auditors recently flagged nearly $260,000 in suspicious overpayments to deputies for security details. Tension then reached a breaking point on May 10th, 2025, when a staggering security breach allowed 10 people, 10, to escape the city jail. It took until October 8th, 2025, for all of those who escaped to be recaptured. That made national news. When Sheriff Susan Hutson ran for re-election 3 days later, Hutson was voted out of office. Voters elected former interim New Orleans Police Department Superintendent Michelle Woodfork to replace Hutson beginning on May 4th. Murrell, the state's attorney, the state's attorney general, Ms. Murrell, noted she had been in productive conversations with the sheriff-elect about improving day-to-day jail operations. So the state's attorney, Murrell, has been talking to Michelle Woodfork, the new sheriff, about improving day-to-day jail operations, tightening security at the facility, and putting basic financial oversight in place to meet state requirements. Newly elected Sheriff Michelle Woodfork issued a statement echoing that, saying, "My team has been working diligently to ensure we are ready to lead effectively from day one." Her statement also pledged a firm commitment to accountability, transparency, and integrity. So both ex-Sheriff Susan Hutson and Bianca Brown are expected to appear in New Orleans State Criminal Courthouse here soon for a status hearing. So, to make a long story short, we've had issues with our St. Louis Sheriff Alfred Montgomery, African American in his 30s, that is in jail, and now you have the first African American woman to be the New Orleans sheriff from about 2022 up to 2025, just in a 3-year period. She was the first African American female sheriff, and days before she left office and tried to get reelected, she got hit with a 30-count indictment and is looking at federal charges, and if convicted, could do federal time. Tell me what you think. We got to hold our politicians accountable. The Sheriff's Department falls under public safety, which has to deal with inmate transfers from jail to courthouse, jail to the medical hospital, and our general public safety for people that are working hard, citizens out here trying to live a better life. The Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, the Fire Department, all should be in alignment with City Hall and the Mayor's office, and all falls under the umbrella of public safety. Both of these scenarios in St. Louis, the Sheriff's Department, and in the New Orleans Sheriff's Department is unfortunate. It causes a black eye, and we have to realign and move in a more positive direction with our governmental agencies and departments to make our cities a safer place. Tell me what you think. This has been the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth.